Welcome to Screaming Reverberations, a podcast traversing the histories and contexts of the work of Thomas Pynchon. I'm Geena.
I'm Frank. The following list of organizations and events runs in roughly chronological order. The FBI, OSS, and OSI, the California Water Wars, the development of reality TV, the Hydra that was the mid-century Republican Party of California, the Watts Insurrection, the Friars Club of Beverly Hills, the murder of Robert F. Kennedy, the forced disintegration of the Black Panther Party, the Manson family, the rise of gang violence in the California streets and prison systems throughout the 1970s, the student revolts of the New Left, the mysterious murder of George Jackson, the rise of the LAPD and California police in general to the status of technocratic Gestapo, the Zebra murders, the SLA, Patty Hearst and Donald DeFreeze, the rise and fall of Richard Nixon, and the apotheosis of Ronald Reagan. What we have here reads at first glance as a greatest hits of parapolitics from before World War II all the way into the 80s, with even some deep cuts and oddities scattered throughout. But what we have is not a compilation or a mere recitation of history. It happens to be the resume of one man, Evelle Younger. A man who rose from Nebraska farmboy to the district attorney of Los Angeles and eventually the attorney general of California. He was once described by LAPD Chief Edward Davis as about as interesting as a mashed potato sandwich. We hope to combat that image of Younger because behind his partially self-cultivated image is the most boring man in California politics, sits a former FBI G-man, a veteran of the OSS's campaigns in Southeast Asia, and one half of a political power couple whose place in the modern right has sat mostly forgotten for the better part of half a century.
Tonight, we hope to dive into this man and his life, rarely discussed at length in our paranoid circles, and his legacy of corruption, his immediate ties to the U.S. intelligence apparatus and organized crime, and the role he played in the advent of serving up technocratic fascism, California style. So welcome to Episode 1, Part 3. We are chugging along at Episode 1, slowly but surely.
It will end.
Eventually it will end.
The first episode will eventually... I think, I don't know, hopefully this numbering system makes sense to people who aren't us.
If it doesn't, then I don't know what to tell you.
Right, then just listen to these bitches as they come out.
Right.
If it don't make sense, just listen as it comes out.
Yeah, this is episode 1 of season 1. We have 11 more quote-unquote episodes planned for you. Maybe before 2027 we'll get season 1 finished.
Right. Maybe eventually we'll talk about Shadow Ticket.
Yeah, maybe. But we did in our live show. About
right, we did.
I just want to say an apology for my vocal fry. I am getting over the flu. I teach preschool and kindergarten, so I get sick a lot.
Right, and we also want to thank everybody for bearing with us through the delay in the making of this episode, but I believe that what we've got here is some very good material. I'm really excited to get into this.
Yeah, and thanks for staying with us.
Right, thank you for staying with us, and, sorry for the month or however long that this took.
Right, the black hole of time that passed by. Okay, what we need to do is we need to preface the rest of this episode with a quote from Inherent Vice, Chapter 1.
Right, we need to establish our footing in the text real quick.
So this guy, Evelle Younger, is mentioned in basically the first or second page in Inherent Vice.
This is one of these instances where a name is basically only mentioned once in Inherent Vice, but I think it's supposed to echo because, this is Penny's boss, essentially. Penny Kimball's one of Doc's girlfriends, and she is a junior deputy DA in Evelle Younger's office. So I definitely feel like this is worth the time we're spending on him, because his presence looms large over the whole novel.
Okay. I'm going to take this quote, if you don't mind.
Do it.
Okay, so it's from Chapter 1 of Inherent Vice. Back when, she could go weeks without anything more complicated than a pout. Now she was laying some heavy combination of face ingredients on him that he couldn't read at all. Maybe something she'd picked up at acting school. It isn't what you're thinking, Doc. Don't worry, thinking comes later. What else? I'm not sure, but it sounds like they want to commit him to some loony bin. You mean legally? Or a snatch of some kind? Nobody's telling me, Doc. I'm just the bait. Come to think of it, there'd never been this much sorrow in her voice either. I heard you're seeing somebody downtown. Seeing, well. Oh, you mean Penny. Nice flatland chick. Out in search of some secret hippie love thrills, basically. Also, some kind of junior DA in Evelle Younger shop. Doc gave it some thought. You think somebody there can stop this before it happens? Not too many places I can go with this, Doc. Okay, I'll talk to Penny. See what we can see. Your happy couple, they have names, addresses. And that's the end of the quote. We're going to pull.
Right, I mean, that's basically from, I don't remember exactly what page, and of course that's going to vary with edition, but that's from the opening sequence of Inherent Vice. Anybody who's read it or even seen the movie will recognize that sequence as, basically the first 5 minutes or the opening pages.
Okay, let's get into this Evelle Younger cat.
Let's do it. Let's break it down. All right, so Evelle Younger was born in 1918 in Stamford, Nebraska, and his father, Harry Younger, struggled immensely trying to make a living farming in the area not necessarily during the Dust Bowl to a T, but during the early years of such, for sure, the early years of the Depression. And he went broke 3 times before he decided to quit farming. Finally kind of brought the family up into the middle class by becoming an auto parts salesman throughout the grander Midwest. And Evelle Younger was actually a second cousin twice removed to the Youngers of the James Younger gang by way of his father. And that is, Jesse James, obviously. The Youngers, a lot like the James family, they were unreconstructed Confederates, and they had served as guerrillas alongside the James brothers under, what was his full name? William Quantrill, I think was his full name. They participated in the mass murder of 200 civilians in Lawrence, Kansas. This was during the bleeding of Kansas right before the Civil War. He was related to them through his father. When he was 15, Evelle Younger lies about his age in the middle of the Depression, and he joins the Kansas National Guard Reserve for the monthly stipend. And this kind of starts his career with the U.S. government.
Do you want to talk about the sources?
Our sources for a lot of this have been, in particular for this first episode on Evelle Younger, a lot of our sources have been from 2 oral histories. And one is Evelle Younger, and the other one is with his wife. And if you as a listener are seeking these out, I will tell you that his wife's is a lot better than his. Evelle Younger's breaks down to about 75 pages and was done in an afternoon. His wife's is about 400 pages and was done over 5 years. This is a paper called Evelle J. Younger, A Lifetime in Law Enforcement, an interview conducted by Stephen Edgington in 1982, and this is part of the Governmental History Documentation Project, specifically with the Ronald Reagan era, and that's being done by UCLA. And then the other one about his wife is entitled, bear with me while I get to the first page, it is titled Mildred Younger, Inside and Outside Government and Politics, 1929 to 1980, an interview conducted by Malka Chall, 1976 to 1981, and that is part of the Women in Politics Oral History Project, and that's out of UC Berkeley. Both of these, they're not hard to find if you know what you're looking for, but it took me a while to find both of these for odd reasons I can't fully explain, other than most of these search engines being bad.
Yeah, we had some spooky things happen.
Right, somebody's editing Evelle Younger's Wikipedia page, for the better, but, like, it's not us.
Yeah, it's not us doing it.
If that's one of you, then good on you. But we had the Wikipedia page for Evelle Younger change while I was looking at it.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
In 1937, Evelle Younger was accepted at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, but he washed out due to health complications. He returns to Nebraska and graduates in 1940 from the University of Nebraska in Lincoln with a law degree, and was a member of the Alpha Tau Omega fraternity, Gamma Theta chapter, and elected to the head of his chapter in his senior year. Fellow ATO alumni include Congressman Jack Kemp, central to the Reaganite mini lavender scare that we will return to soon, Congressman Larry McDonald, who co-founded the Western Goals Foundation with John K. Singlau, and who was later killed in the downing of KAL 007, discussed in an early episode, and, drumroll please, Art Linkletter, also discussed
Friend of the show.
Yeah, friend of the show. Discussed pretty, I don't say deeply, but he was discussed earlier in an earlier episode.
Right, we mentioned him.
Mm-hmm. Who would also later go on to become a highly prominent California Republican. Almost immediately following graduation, he joined the FBI, where he served from 1940 to 1942.
Right, so now we get into Evelle's time with the FBI, which all of his time with the FBI feels very pertinent with the fact that, you know, there is that great scene in Inherent Vice where Penny sets Doc up to be accosted by the FBI. He joined the FBI, like you said, 1940, and he spent a lot of his time with the FBI stationed in New York. He spent a little bit of time stationed in D.C., but most of it was in New York. And there were a lot of pull quotes that I found where, like, he was very happy to refer to himself as one of Hoover's top special agents, but that does not entirely seem to be true. He was involved in a number of disciplinary actions in the 2 years that he was with the FBI. In one instance, while tailing international longshoreman and warehouse union leader Harry Bridges, so this is from an article in The Voice, which was a Maryland labor paper, and this is dated from September 11th, 1941. What's it mean, folks?
everything and nothing. Probably nothing. Never forget, though.
Never forget. In one instance, while tailing international longshoreman and warehouse union leader Harry Bridges, he actually got caught tailing Harry Bridges. And Bridges basically spent some time fucking with the FBI once he found out that they were following him. And this was pretty easily done because the FBI agents were literally bugging him from the next hotel room over at the Hotel Edison. Harry Bridges would invite reporters to his hotel room from across the street, and they would watch as, like, they would go to a payphone and call Harry Bridges' room. And as soon as the phone started ringing in his room, all of the guys in the other room are, like, putting on their headphones and getting ready. And they're watching these guys do this from, like, the rooftop. So they were very aware of all of this. So he was very aware of this, and he would just lie on the floor and he could see all of the wires and the headphones lying on the floor in the next room. And it was just very apparent that they were doing a very poor job of tailing him. And all of this came to a head when Bridges and one of his reporter friends disassembled the telephone box in his room. And they found the bug while the agents were in the next room listening to the conversation. And at this point, Harry Bridges seems to have basically chased Evelle Younger out of the building via this fire escape. This was pretty big embarrassment to the FBI. There's a number of Evelle Younger's FBI records are also available online. I believe that was also on the archive. We can find somewhere to put that.
I'm just imagining like the FBI agents like scramble down the fire escape like Scooby-Doo, like running from a ghost.
No, right?
Yikes.
It's fucking cartoonish.
The 40s were a different time.
They were.
Yeah, now you just get swatted and like get shot to death.
Right, now you just get fucking killed.
Yeah, R.I.P. good times. Some shenanigans. Okay, he also like fucked up again during his time in the FBI, right?
Right. Well, he never seems to have received much more than like a cursory reprimand for any of this. So like maybe J. Edgar Hoover did like him. I don't know. The record seems to indicate that him and Hoover had like a fairly cordial relationship. You know, I mean, another one of the other like disciplinary action that I found him involved with was like a fracas with like his landlord and a lease, and that admittedly seems to have been the fault of a fucking landlord, which goes to show you that the 40s were indeed not a different fucking time.
Right. Nothing changes.
Right, it seems like this guy was like, it seems like their landlord was low-key scamming the FBI, but like, it wasn't anything that I would call like, his other one was definitely not as interesting.
Right, we just want to put that on record. Okay, so Evelle Younger was also in the OSS.
Right, it's like, regardless of like, whatever his disciplinary record in the FBI was, it's like, he very quickly left and joined the OSS. But, I mean, he would eventually go on to join the Society of... Oh, this is a fucking name. The Society for Former Special Agents of the FBI, which is basically like a J. Edgar Hoover hero cult. Like, this is an organization... These are the people who sell J. Edgar Hoover busts. If you're looking for one of those, they sell them. They're pretty fucking expensive, but if you want a J. Edgar Hoover bust, they will hook you the fuck up.
Good to know.
So eventually, you know, I will not tell anybody when I win the lottery, but there will be signs.
I'm gonna get that Nixon bong.
The Nixon, I don't remember a Nixon bong.
Oh, there's this meme. I'm sorry, just derailing this further. There's this meme of like, oh, when your paycheck hits, it's like, oh, the first week is just like the picture of this elaborate Nixon shaped bong, and the second picture is like the second week, and it was like basically like ice cube
like
soup.
Yeah, like ice on bread.
Yeah.
Hang on, Oh, yeah, I'd buy that. Oh, wow. According to what I'm looking at, these are vintage.
Oh, shit.
These are like contemporary. These are very expensive because a lot of these, at least the people who sell them are claiming that they were made in the 1960s.
Okay, well, you know the White Earp mug from Inherent Vice?
Right.
That's also contemporary.
I will say that as somebody who knows a thing or two about this, they kind of look like they might be because, like, they're not properly made. They look very, I don't know, if they were modern, at this point, they've got the fine art of, like, making a bong out of a weird shape down.
Let's get back to the OSS. Let's stop smoking the Nixon shit.
Fair point.
So from 1942 to 1946, Younger served in OSS's X-2 division, whose primary purpose was cooperative efforts with British troops and intelligence outfits.
And for anybody who is not immediately clocking it, the OSS was the immediate predecessor to the CIA. If any of our listeners were not aware of that history, the OSS very shortly turned into the CIA.
Younger served in the Burmese theater, also spending time in Karachi and Calcutta, and even sending a letter to J. Edgar Hoover from India detailing the story of Burmese villagers' love for FBI G-men they saw glimpses of in their encounters with American culture. Serving in the Burmese jungle, his ultimate commanding officer would have been the British Lord Francis Mountbatten, final Viceroy of India, cousin to the Queen, and uncle to her husband. a noted pedophile, later famously killed by a bomb planted on his yacht by the IRA during the war against the English.
Unfortunately, I was not able to turn up a lot about Younger's time in the military. I really wasn't able to turn up a whole lot about his time in Burma other than that he was there. Which, I mean, I would assume that, like, any of his mail home was being censored. I don't know that, like it's not discussed at length in either of these oral histories. It's kind of glanced over in his. It's discussed a little bit longer in his wife's. Kind of frustrating. If anybody turns up anything about Evelle Younger's time with the OSS, don't be afraid to get up with me, because I would be fascinated to know about it.
So Younger also served in Army intelligence in Korea to an unspecified capacity, and by the 1950s had risen to Brigadier General of the Air Force Reserves, detached to notorious Air Force Office of Special Investigations alongside Lynn Buck Compton, future LA Chief Deputy DA under Younger, and chief prosecutor in the trial of Sirhan Sirhan.
I find his time in Southeast Asia with the OSS, like, really interesting in the context of Thomas Pynchon and Inherent Vice, because of the Golden Fang's heroin activities in South. It's not just their heroin activity, that's what they do. The China cowboy faction of the OSS are very legendary for their involvement in the story of heroin trafficking post-World War II. We spent a long time in our last episode talking about that. And if you're interested in that, you can go to Recluse's sources that we cited in those episodes. Pynchon's Golden Fang seems to draw very much from the same circles as those that composed these real-life heroin syndicates. And Evelle Younger's got a very complex position within the history of California organized crime. And that's something we're going to get far more into once we get to his time as district attorney and attorney general. And his time with the OSI, I think, is worth noting, given the development through World War II of air-based drug trafficking, moving drugs with planes. And especially, the long-standing rumors about Air Force involvement in the movement of drugs. Very famously, you've got the Flying Tiger line, parts of which eventually evolved into FedEx. I would highly recommend our friend Dr. Blob's work on that. But his time with the Air Force OSI, if any of that is true, and if the Air Force... If any drugs were ever being moved on Air Force planes, then, like, the Air Force OSI are the people who are in the prime position to take a cut of that. That's the palm you would need to grease to get some action on that. I think that's really interesting, and honestly, it's only really the beginning of our conclusions linking Evelle Younger to the Golden Fang. I think I can go ahead and very well say that, one of our grand conclusions with this episode is that Evelle Younger is intended to be a member of the Golden Fang.
Ooh-wee-oo.
Ooh-wee-oo.
Okay, we're gonna get to his wife, Mildred.
Right, we gotta talk about Mildred. We're gonna spend a long time with Mildred.
Yeah, bear with us.
She is an interesting broad. I don't think you're gonna have to bear with us, because in many ways, she is just as interesting, if not more interesting, than her husband. Not just some random lady, for sure.
Yeah, she's a powerhouse in her own right.
Right.
So in 1942, Younger married Mildred Eberhard, so that's Eberhard, whom he had met while on FBI assignment in New York. Mildred was a California native born in 1920, whose parents had come to California from Minnesota. Mildred was in New York during a brief stint working as a model and copywriter for Mademoiselle magazine after college. Mildred described their marriage, which would come to shape the rest of Evelle's and her own life, as thus. Do you want to take this quote?
I had met Evelle while working for Mademoiselle in New York. We simply joined thousands of others who married under the pressure of wartime. The 8th time we met was at the altar of the University Methodist Church, July 3rd, 1942, a week after I graduated.
So that's a pretty fast marriage.
The 8th time they met. That is just fucking... I mean, this is another... Like, it's like, well, it was a different time, I guess.
Yeah. So following their marriage, their son Eric was born in short order. And, save for Evelle's time stationed at the San Francisco Presidio and his military service... big wheel. The Youngers settled in Los Angeles County for the remainder of their lives.
So to give a brief family background on Mildred, she was actually the daughter of a man named Ray Eberhard, and he was a highly influential Los Angeles attorney, particularly in the fields of water law and public education law. Ray served as a key legal advisor during the city of LA's continued dominance of the Owens Valley water rights and the continued development of the Los Angeles aqueducts and the channeling of the LA River. And these events serve as the backdrop to Roman Polanski's Chinatown. Inherent Vice's very important Channelview Estates. It sits right beside the Dominguez Flood Control Channel, which is a piece of LA Department of Water and Power infrastructure that in the 1940s, it became so polluted from the nearby oil refineries that the water in the surrounding marshland caught on fire a number of times.
We love it when water catches fire.
We love it. Shout out to Randy Newman's, what's the title of that song?
I'm not the Randy Newman head here.
Is it called Burn On? Yeah, it's called Burn On. I should be shot for not remembering that. So Mildred's uncle, Claire Eberhard, Ray's brother, he was also a fairly influential attorney, and he served as the chief of the criminal division in the LA City Attorney's Office, before going into private practice alongside his brother as kind of informal partners. Mildred's sister Elizabeth, whose married name became Elizabeth Ziegler, was a Los Angeles municipal judge herself from 1949 to 68, when Reagan raised her to the California Supreme Court, where she served until 1980. So again, the entire family is just eat up with highly influential, people in specifically the Los Angeles County, and I suppose the grander California legal scene. And Mildred spent a lot of her childhood, going to the Owens Valley with her father to work on these water projects. She spent a lot of time going to California state legislature meetings with her father in Sacramento, because he eventually became a very important lobbyist for the LA Department of Water and Power at the State Assembly in Sacramento. And she claims to have spent precisely one day employed as a page girl in the California State Senate. Do you want to grab this quote?
Yeah, I will. Okay. So this is from her oral history. Gardner Johnson. He was one of the assemblymen who got me deathly sick buying me candy and raisins the day I was a page in the California Assembly, the first day they ever allowed girl pages. I think I was 9. My mother said, no more of that, because I was sick as a dog by that night. There wasn't anything that the legislators didn't buy the little girl page.
You were an unusual little girl page. You were a little younger than any of the others, and the only one, maybe?
I don't remember. I suspect there were probably other little girls. In those days, children did indeed do the work of the pages. They were usually legislators' kids or something, and you learned a fair amount about getting the bills and other operational procedures. But of course, in those days, people pretty much had the run of the legislative chambers. Staff were small. It was very different. But I run into these odd overlaps in generations because... And it ends. Right.
That was the pertinent section. So it's worth taking a break real quick to note about her father, Ray, and his position with the LA Department of Water and Power. Some people know this, some people don't. If you've read Cadillac Desert, you definitely know this. I need to read it further. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is not simply just another department of the city. It is another department of the city, but it isn't. Within the city of Los Angeles, it holds a particularly outsized influence. LA has a very unique situation in regards to its water. You know, the Department of Water and Power, I don't know how else to describe it other than to call it just practical power. You know, they don't hold political power. They don't even hold social power. It's just practical, it's literal power. You know, they hold the fucking actual power, the energy even, you know, literally, you know what I mean?
Right.
The Department of Water and Power has maintained the strength to drain the Owens Valley for over 100 years. You know, and if you're not too familiar with California geography, you know, go look at a map and go look at how far away the Owens Valley is from Los Angeles. You know, go see how far away it is we get our fucking water from, and think about that real hard. The power of this city over that water right has been maintained in the face of, you know, armed and legal resistance by the residents of the Owens Valley and Inyo County, people around Mono Lake, all of that. The history of water in LA is very long, and it's something that we're definitely going to be getting into in the near future. You know, but to really get into the history of LA water here would just sidetrack us even further. Let it suffice to say that, you know, in a real quick summary, the LA Department of Water and Power is a direct descendant of the cartel structure of the LA Water Company, which we're not going to get into any of that right now. But, you know, if you want to look into the LA Water Company, that is a very interesting topic. The LA Department of Water and Power's rights over any of this water in the Owens Valley or in Mono Lake, it's been maintained with constant subterfuge and fraud. And Ray Eberhard would directly have aided and abetted as a lawyer and a legal advisor, and eventually as a lobbyist for the Department of Water and Power. You know, his earliest years with the DWP in the 20s, this would have been during the strongest struggle in the Owens Valley against the foreclosure of the water rights. You know, they were literally planting bombs and blowing up the LA Aqueduct. He would have been present during the hearings surrounding the St. Francis Dam failure in the Santa Clarita Valley. Shout out to the Santa Clarita Valley. But that's where William Mulholland's shoddy fucking water policy and his bullshit workmanship, it killed 431 people, over 100 of which were children. You know, Mildred Younger said that her father personally carried the bonds that paid for the Hoover Dam to Chicago. South California is the largest recipient of Hoover Dam's energy to this day. We get more of it than even Nevada does. You know, and his presence in Sacramento would have been really important for LA's acquisition of the water rights for Mono Lake, which is even further fucking north than the Owens Valley. At that point, I think it's like 350 miles away or something. You know, so this is a very, very influential figure who's employed in a sector of the city that can only really be described as like crushingly powerful. I mean, the LA Department of Water and Power is just overwhelmingly powerful. It's hard to really like conceive of how powerful a unit like that would be.
Right, literal power.
Right, you know, because it's like, well, it doesn't matter who runs it, you know, Republicans run it, Democrats run it, fascists run it, whoever runs it. It's like, these are the people who decide whether or not you fucking turn the faucet and anything happens. These are the people who determine whether you flick the switch and anything happens. That is just crushingly fucking powerful. All of this is evolved out of a literal mafia in the city of Los Angeles around water. You know, all of this has evolved from a literal cartel structure like Out of Gravity's Rainbow around water in Los Angeles. Because water in LA has been dog shit since before the Civil War. They had fucked the water here up so bad. It's been that bad for that long. You know, again, we're going to be getting into this. If you can bear with us, dear listener, we will eventually get into this at fucking excruciating length.
So, to return to Mildred herself, she would go on to graduate from UCLA, the same as her father and eventually her son. She rose to become a national champion debater in her college years and began not only modeling part-time, but also giving lectures in various subjects. Beauty and brains for Mildred.
Well, I mean, she's repeatedly referred to as, like, a very good-looking woman, and I mean,
I mean, the pictures that we have of her are, she's okay. I mean...
Right, I mean, I suppose definitely for, like, the Republican Party in California being very active in the Republican Party at these meetings and such, it's like, there definitely couldn't have been that many, like, young women in general.
Right.
Let alone women who had worked as models, you know?
So Ray and Claire Eberhard had a massive effect on Mildred and were extremely influential in Evelle's career going forward, with Evelle in turn being deeply affected by the Eberhards, to the point that many have asserted that Evelle's political ambitions were actually a projection of his wife's ambitions. This is from Mildred Younger, Inside and Outside Politics, 1929 and 1980, which, in a fascinating turn, was authored by an ex-employee of Edward Bernays.
Right, I didn't keep going with that, but this Malka Chal that did all these interviews over 5 years with Mildred Younger, she used to work for Edward Bernays at his PR firm. So that's fucking everything with these people, you know, it's... Ed Davis is like, these people are like mashed potato sandwiches, and it's like, motherfucker, everything I turn over with these people fascinated me. You can attest to it. I have not shut up about either one of these fucking assholes.
Right.
I'm tired of talking about them at this point.
Okay, so she says, I remember my husband, maybe down around the courts, would call him Uncle Claire. Of course, my husband is physically much larger than either one of them were, and my uncle would say, "You big lout, I am not your uncle." He pretended to be very upset by this. My father and uncle were unusually close and enjoyed each other tremendously, but they were very different in many ways. For instance, Daddy didn't drink or approve of drinking. Uncle Claire always had a delicate air of bourbon about him. That's a nice sentence.
Right.
Motherfuckers stink like booze.
That's a very astute way of calling someone an alcoholic.
Right. After Evelle and I settled down here, Uncle Claire decided that Daddy would never teach his son-in-law some of the facts of Los Angeles. He took Evelle around to his favorite haunts in places like Chinatown, where a couple of slugs of bourbon could be had while exchanging gossip and rumors before work in the mornings. Jesus Christ. It may have been illegal, but Uncle Claire had no kids of his own and delighted in passing on some of the secrets of the criminal law practice to his willing pupil.
This is another one of her passages where she's being very coy. You know, the same thing with, like, there wasn't anything that the legislators didn't buy the little girl Paige. That's just an ominous fucking line.
That's so creepy.
That's ooh.
This just like, I don't want to get into that. So Mildred served as Evelle's entrance into the world of California politics, and for much of his early career, vastly eclipsed him in power. It is not an understatement to say that his career would not have been possible without Mildred's political connections and impressive skill. Seeing as such, large parts of his story are as much Mildred's as they are Evelle's.
Now we've got to get into probably the most fascinating part of Mildred's life. I spent a long time on this. I spent like maybe a little bit too long.
Yeah, this is your pet project these days.
Well, because it's fascinating. I think it's really fascinating. Because she kind of just drops this, like, I went to Paris one summer. But in 1940, Mildred Younger did not go to Paris one summer. She participated in the 1940 Japan-America Student Peace Conference, which was a series of co-national student conferences that started in 1934. And they're still going on today, but they've removed the word peace from their name. A notable alumni of the JASPC is Mr. Henry fucking Kissinger, who would go a little over a decade later than Mildred in 1951. So this is from their website. The Japan-America Student Conference is a student-led exchange program initiated in 1934 by university students concerned by the breakdown of bilateral relations prior to the Second World War. Today, an equal number of students from the U.S. and Japan are competitively selected each year to spend one summer month together, studying and analyzing Japan-U.S. relations while visiting 4 diverse regions in the host country. JASC alternates its host country every year, emphasizing the personal connections between the 2 distinct cultures gathered together in one place. I think most of us already know this, but just to refresh some memories and maybe inform some people who don't immediately remember. So that breakdown in bilateral relations followed Imperial Japan's brutal invasion and occupation of Manchuria in 1931, which itself followed on from the Japanese occupation of Korea in 1910. So in 1937, Imperial Japanese troops had invaded China, and they committed numerous atrocities during the Battle of Shanghai, and that was followed almost immediately by the rape of Nanking. Immediately prior to the 1940 JASPC in late 1939, the Japanese Kwantung Army had engaged in some really hardcore border clashes with the Soviet Army in Manchukuo and Mongolia.
I just want to say, so I used to work at a bookstore that closed down. Borders, R.I.P. And
shout out to Borders.
Shout out to Borders. In the Japanese language section, a customer, I don't know who it was, but he or she or they kept putting the book, The Rape of Nanking, in the Japanese language section.
That's baller. That's low-key a baller move.
Almost every fucking day.
I gotta, shout out to Iris Chang. That's one of the books that fucking changed my life, honestly. I will always cite that as, I don't know, maybe it's not exactly a parapolitical book, because, The Rape of Nanking is not exactly, parapolitics to a degree. That was one of the books that really got me started to think that it's history is not what they fucking tell you. There are entire sectors of history that, you have nothing. The worst thing that ever happened, you still don't even fucking know about. Alright, so a lot of our remarks about the Japan-America Student Peace Conference in 1940, they are sourced from a very handy source that is actually the diary of a man named James Halsema, and that's held in the University of Kansas's Center for East Asian Studies. That's available online, dear listener. James Halsema was actually the American-born son of E.J. Halsema, who was a Filipino engineer and governor, actually, during the American occupation. He was the governor, I believe, of an entire province in the Philippines. So Mildred Younger attended as a representative of UCLA, and Japan's recent actions in mainland Asia made for a very apprehensive tone among the students. A lot of photography was forbidden. Halsema makes repeated references to his belief that his diary was being read, most likely by members of the Kampeitai, which was Japan's secret police and one of the biggest of their many intelligence agencies. So they arrived in Japan aboard the MV Asama Maru. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, it's good enough. I mean, my Japanese pronunciation is not the greatest in the world.
The majority of the conference seems to have been occupied with the discussion of Japan-America relations. In 1940, they were looking to improve Japan-American relations.
Christ.
Burning the midnight oil on that shit. It's a little late, buddy.
Yeah.
So they would discuss Japanese-American relations with these Japanese students. They would visit Japanese industrial sites. They would meet with Japanese leaders of industry and politics. They would do, they went and did tea ceremonies and just, Japanese tourist stuff. The most interesting part of the trip, though, really the thing that made me pull the e-brake and look at it for nearly a week straight, is the fact that they spent 2 weeks in Japanese-occupied Korea, and they went up into the puppet state of Manchukuo. And, again, her oral history is real blasé about this. It's like, well, we went, and it was certainly Japan during the war, and they were a little odd, but we came home. The Halsema document is far more enlightening about it, but even that is relatively bland about all of this stuff. I don't know that any of them... I don't know. It's a really odd atmosphere that none of them were, more repulsed at where they were. I don't know. There were actually some really interesting names on the Japanese alumni who sat on the board of the 1940 JASPC committee. Among them were Yamamuro Yushin, who served as the executive chairman of the Tokyo branch of the JASPC. Yushin seems to have later served as the CEO of Mitsubishi Bank Limited in the 1990s. And the man who seems to have handled the logistical parts of the Manchukuo portion of the trip was a man named Kyonosuke Aoki.
Kyonosuke.
You do that? Kyonosuke?
Kyonosuke.
Kyonosuke.
Kyonosuke. There's no, you don't put, a, accent on any of the syllables. It's pretty flat.
Kyonosuke.
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 No.
Cut this shit out.
Okay.
Cut this shit out.
Okay.
Anyway, god damn it.
Kyonosuke Aoki.
Thank you. Who may well be... You want to do that one too?
Yonosuke Aoki. Father of Hiroki Aoki.
Who was the founder of the Benihana restaurant chain, who was the grandfather, Yonosuke Aoki, is the grandfather of EDM DJ Steve Aoki. So once again, fascist Nepo baby detected.
Let's hit the needle drop.
Maybe these are not the same person, but I could definitely, the dropping of that K would be a very standard romanization thing, right? In the document, he's referred to as Kyonosuke.
Mm-hmm.
In everything I've read about the Aoki family, it's Yonosuke. They would drop that K in the process of romanization, right?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how things get, because things get, moved around and stuff when you're, putting it into, Roman, letters.
It was very hard to do a lot of research on some of these guys. These were very chance references, and, it immediately devolved into Japanese language sources, and most of which were themselves very, not long. This seems to be who this was. The Manchukuo portion of the trip also involved close logistical support from the South Manchuria Railway Company, and they had extensive ties to Japan's extreme far right, and they were known by the nickname the Japanese East India Company, and they pervaded nearly every aspect of life in Japanese-occupied Korea and Manchuria. I would highly point our listeners to Jimmy Fallon Gong's work on Imperial Japan, and also Marcus's work on Imperial Japan over at Program to Chill and Return of the Repressed, respectively.
The reports of the students from Manchukuo seem rather dismal, with travel conditions being cramped, awkward, and fraught with wartime complications, as well as the constant surveillance of the students by their chaperones. The Imperial Japanese intent was most certainly to impress the American students with the normality of proceedings in Korea and China and the lack of privation among the civilians there. Both Halsema and Younger's remark on witnessing the immense military action in East Asia as a whole. Mildred Younger makes reference to seeing Japanese troops billeted in Shinto temples in Korea and on the home islands. Despite mass hunger, not only among the Korean and Chinese population, but also the Japanese. The students were repeatedly well fed and had tea time with dainties with Russian fascists in Harbin. Less than 20 miles away, Unit 731 were committing some of the most barbaric acts recorded to history on Chinese and Korean prisoners.
I couldn't really get over the fact that they went to Harbin. I couldn't, like, when I kind of learned that, like, my blood sort of ran fucking cold. I can't emphasize to our listeners enough, like, you know, on the off chance that you don't know much about the history of
Imperial Japan.
You can leave that one in.
Okay.
You know, but if you don't know much about the history of Imperial Japan, I mean, we are talking about, this is hell on earth. This is not a place to fucking just pack a bag and go. The Japanese were collecting Chinese civilians off the street and doing, not the, you know, obviously it is not a fucking pissing contest of morality, but, like, these were people doing things equal to, if not worse than, like, Nazi medical experiments. This is genuinely one of the most barbaric chapters of history you could ever fucking choose to read about. This is a very weird place to go. And it's really weird, like I said, that none of them weren't more repulsed by it. Because, I mean, I don't know that a fair amount of these things weren't, I don't know that, you know, Unit 731 was exactly common knowledge, but, like, you know, the Battle of Shanghai and the rape of Nanking and all of this, that, and the other thing, these were not done in fucking secret. Like I said earlier, like, you know, these were not acts of parapolitics. These were things that everybody knew about. You can't kill 500,000 people in 3 months and not have anybody notice it. That's fucking absurd.
It's disgusting. And also, like, that attitude of not having an attitude towards it is really repulsive.
Right. Again, it's like, I don't know. I think it should be highly noted on the personalities of the people we're dealing with going forward. In 1940, this woman was offered the chance to go to Imperial Japan and said, yeah, that sounds like a fun vacation.
Yeah, sounds like a great opportunity.
And, you know, she's, like I said, you know, she's very cagey about her time in Japan. You know, and when she's asked about the outbreak of the war following her visit to Japan in this oral history, this is what she's got to say for herself. I just wonder how you felt about it, knowing the Japanese as you did.
And she says, dreadfully ambivalent. Let me repeat that. Dreadfully ambivalent.
I think that should reflect highly on, I don't know, it's really weird to me. I'm just thinking about this in the moment. This hadn't even occurred to me until, like, I'm sitting here thinking about it, like, right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but, like, you would think, like, a member of this generation, you know, somebody of the World War II generation. It's like, well, no matter what you thought about the Japanese before Pearl Harbor, that was a definite turning point. Like we discussed earlier, I mean, within 2 years, she would go on to be married to a man who was fighting the Japanese in the fucking jungles of Burma. And she still can't really get up to, other than to be like, well, they were sort of off. They were a little weird. You know, she still can't get her dander off enough at these Japanese fascists to be like, oh, well, I don't care for them. You know, and it's like, well, your husband fucking fought them. You know, you would think that would change somebody's mind, at least even in retrospect. Especially at this, it's like a very weird personality defect in this woman, to a degree.
Right.
You know, obviously I'm not saying that she should have had some racial animus against the Japanese, but, like, given her history with the Japanese, she should be feeling a lot more than she is.
Okay, do you want to go into some Pynchon stuff?
Right, like, I think it's worth noting, just, like, I don't know how much of this is meant with it, but, you know, I think it's worth noting that Pynchon's got a very high level of knowledge regarding Japanese history from the Meiji Restoration forward. You know, because Vineland features these plot threads that showcase a very good understanding of the Yakuza's place in the rise of modern Japan, particularly its position as a U.S. puppet state. And Against the Day's got numerous references to Japan, even Japanese gold, Yamashita's gold, like we got into with the WSC, with the American Security Council. We got into with all that, but I think most importantly here, the Chums of Chance do extensive work for the Black Dragon Society, which was a far-right secret society dedicated to Japanese imperial dominance worldwide, and I think it's also worth noting, even though Inherent Vice's Golden Fang, they're referred to time and again as an Indo-Chinese operation. One of the few real representatives of the Golden Fang that we meet in the novel is Blondie-san, who is not Southeast Asian, he's not Chinese, but he's Japanese. And that definitely constellates to the real-life participation of the Japanese army in the blooming of the drug trade, specifically up in Manchukuo, where the Japanese trafficking drugs in occupied Korea and Manchuria, that was just the rule of the day. The opium trade up there absolutely bloomed under the Japanese. But you also have to consider the fact that, one of the primary things that led to the development of the Chinese nationalist presence in the drug trafficking industry was the presence of the Japanese in Southeast Asia. So even though that wasn't, you see what I mean? They're contributing to the ambient conditions that allow for the rise of this drug trafficking.
So we're going to go on with Mildred Eberhard.
Right, we gotta keep going with her.
Mm-hmm.
Which, a lot of the early part of this story, it kind of is her story in a way. Up until, let's say, 1958 or so, Mildred is far more influential than her husband. Her husband really is just a Nebraska farm boy who did some work for the government a few times. Whereas she is the one who has, actual entrenched power, actual contacts within the state of California. So for a large part of this, we do have to spend it talking about Mildred and not Evelle. This was one of the things that contributed to this being a two-part episode, was the fact that his wife was not just some random fucking broad, how I wish she had been.
Alright, this would have been so much simpler.
This would have been, we would have smoked this shit a month ago if he just married some crazy bitch that stayed at the house.
So as mentioned above, Mildred Eberhard serves as Evelle Younger's foot in the door within the California GOP. When they settled in the Southland in the wake of World War II, Evelle passed the California bar and took a series of jobs, alternating between working as a deputy to the city attorney of Los Angeles and working in private practice before taking the job of city attorney of Pasadena. Mildred and Evelle both immediately became highly active in the LA County Young Republicans, with Evelle being elected chairman of the LA County Young Republicans in 1949, moving up to chairman of the LA County Republican Party as a whole in 1950, shortly before being recalled into military service in Korea. Mildred was highly active in Republican women's groups such as the California Federation of Republican Women, where she sat several terms as a member of the board of directors. The Youngers slowly emerged as one of the most active young Republican couples in the entirety of Los Angeles County and built lasting relationships with high-level Republicans across the state, including then-Governor Earl Warren and Richard Nixon, then Vice President under Eisenhower.
That is Earl Warren, later of the Warren Commission, the investigation into the assassination of JFK, for those that don't know. What were you? You were...
Wasn't she an Eastern Star member? Or she's like the Lady Masons?
Give me 1 second. No, her mother was a member of Eastern Star.
All right,
her mother was a member of Eastern. Because I was about to say, I don't remember that Evelle Younger was I don't remember him being a Mason or a Shriner or anything.
That's right, her mom.
Okay, there is no reference to her father being a Mason, but her mother was an Eastern Star.
Okay, that tracks with, the family being connected.
Right. I don't know, like I said, I don't know that Evelle Younger was ever a Mason. I don't think he was. The Agency of Former Special Agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, yes, for sure. And Beverly Hills Friars Club,
Right.
which we're gonna be getting to that in the next episode, unfortunately, but we will be getting into that.
Right. Okay, so you want to talk about Mildred and the politics?
So Mildred rode her long support of Earl Warren into being appointed as one of his delegates to the 1952 Republican National Convention, where Warren was one of the frontrunners for presidential nomination. He'd previously run for excuse me, shit, I'm drinking beer and I'm burping. Foster's.
Oh, the gentle air of Foster's around you.
The delicate air.
The delicate air.
The delicate air of cheap beer, yeah. He had previously run for vice president under Thomas Dewey, who Mildred had also done a lot of campaigning for. Mildred contributed to the Warren campaign in the capacity of a strategist and a speechwriter. Speechwriter would later, over the years, become her specialty, actually. She wrote a number of speeches for Richard Nixon, from what I understand. Her relationships with powerful Republicans were just going to continue to grow. Nixon himself nominated her in 1952 as a secretary for the Civil Rights Subcommittee of the Republican Platform and Resolutions Committee, and he would later tap Mildred as the brain trust of his vice presidential campaign in 1952 and his 1960 campaign for California governor. Evelle would later serve as a delegate for Nixon at the 1968 Republican National Convention. A lot of their oral histories, just to make an aside, in their oral histories, both of them seem to repeatedly downplay their association with Nixon, which to me seems mostly to be a product of when these oral histories were done, because it seems to me that they had a pretty good fucking relationship with the Nixons.
They're the ones who really deserve the Nixon bong.
Right. I would, if Evelle Younger bong, hey, at this point, you had to stop me from buying the EJY Club bag.
Okay. Let's keep moving on. Let's chug. Come on, Frankie, let's chug.
So Mildred used her position on this Civil Rights Committee to show early shades of where her and Evelle were headed politically. So this is a quote from her oral history. "The issue that I most got involved about was the one that led me to run for public office later, and that was the issue of the amount of material that was being disseminated in the state, and I assume nationally, but certainly in a state that had an election for a delegation as opposed to a convention. That was the problem of the tremendous amount of professional bigotry. I think that in some area or another, whether we're conscious of it or not, probably everyone has some prejudices. We don't mean to, but we do. But this has taken on a pattern. It was anti-Semitic, it was anti-black, it was anti-Catholic, and there was always a price tag on it. Now, I can't justify bigotry, ever, but I can understand prejudices, particularly in a time of economic crisis or something like that where jobs are hard to come by, and where you're getting challenges from what seems to be a particular segment of the population. That at least is understandable to some degree, that you start reacting and reacting frequently in ways that you shouldn't react." So Mildred used a lot of her time in this committee kind of hedging her position on racism, and feigning ignorance in regards with the Republican Party's wholesale financing of far-right hate tract publishers like G.L.K. Smith and Gerald L.K. Smith, let me say his name in full, and extremists in general. Mildred repeatedly blames the rocky history of the civil rights movement on, quote-unquote, the anger of urban blacks. That's a statement that's going to come back really resonating deeply as we move into this next episode. She also speaks dismissively of the rest of the U.S. She says that bigotry was a way of life in the South, which I'm not here to dispute, it definitely is, but California is founded on the exact same type of fucking bigotry. And these kind of fucking purposefully inane, naive statements about, civil rights in the U.S. So, these kind of purposefully inane, just naive statements about civil rights in the U.S., they kind of mirror her husband's, later on, very J. Edgar Hoover stance on California organized crime, which is to say that he just said it did not exist at all, and the Youngers, I think, like, one thing to note with them, what you have with the Youngers are not, like, out front screaming American Nazis, but they are the members of the Republican Party who were repeatedly deployed as, like, a liberal bumper, and they are there to, absorb these attacks from the far right, and have people call them fucking communists and, like, race traitors and all this, that, and the other thing. And the ultimate function of that within the Republican Party is really just to make them look like a more progressive unit as a whole. We're going to elaborate on this further in our next section.
So Mildred runs for Senate.
Right, she did. She ran for state.
State Senate, right. Not the Senate.
Right, California state legislature, right, like where she'd grown up.
So in 1954, Mildred Younger continued her sanctimonious campaign to clean up the image of the California Republican Party by running for California's state senate. Her opposition was a member of her own party, Jack Tenney, so that's Tenney, whom she correctly described as a hate monger in the pocket of GLK Smith.
Right. Tenney was the incumbent.
So Smith, who we discussed briefly in a previous episode, was the Wisconsin-born originator of Christian identity thought, a former partner of Huey Long, founder of the America First Party, the Christian National Party, and the Constitution Party, these serving at multiple points as different names for what was essentially the same institution. He was a cornerstone of the California extreme right for half a century. He would later go on to build the Christ of the Ozarks statue featured prominently in the opening credits of True Detective Season 3.
Good season, I liked it.
Yeah.
It's not great, but I liked it.
Right. Smith's America First Party served as a de facto extension of the America First Committee we discussed in our last Manson episode after the America First Committee had dissolved following the outbreak of the war.
The America First Party was definitely more of a, it did not have the elements of the America First Committee where some of them were just outright pacifists who sort of got suckered into it. Like, the America First Party was like a definite fascist outfit. Very unabashed, super duper right wing. Jack Tenney was actually a former band leader in the Mexican-American border region, kind of Tijuana, places like that. And he had stumbled into politics through his position as the president of the LA chapter of the American Federation of Musicians Union. Jack Tenney spent many years as the head of what they called the Tenney Commission, which was officially called the California Senate Fact-Finding Subcommittee on Un-American Activities. And that served as kind of the California-specific equivalent of Joseph McCarthy's HUAC committee. And it ran for a fucking crazy amount of time. It ran from 1941 to 1970.
It's a fuck ton of time.
From what I understand, it basically devolved into like a joke at the end of it. By the last 5 years of it, it was basically like a sideshow, from what I understand. Because you couldn't do anything with it, from what I understand. They never indicted they didn't indict anybody, let alone fucking convict anybody. Everybody just kind of got sent up to HUAC, and that's where if anybody got anything, they got it there. This was definitely kind of just a weird sideshow. At some point, I might look further into it. Somebody should do some digging on Jack Tenney, but we really just didn't have the time, low-key. Anyway, the QAC harassed just as many people as HUAC, though. A lot of people, like Paul Robeson, like I said, a lot of people were targets of both of them. If anybody got anything, it was HUAC, not QAC. They would go on to make the lives of everyone from the Black Panthers, the Latin labor movement, student radicals, all these people, they made their lives very hard. Most Pynchonianly, though, our dear friend Frank Sinatra got called in front of the QAC. This is again one of these moments where Frank Sinatra got called a communist early on in his career for some reason.
Yeah, Big Pinko, that guy.
Right. Legendary actor Edward G. Robinson got called in front of QAC, not HUAC. He got called in front of QAC, and he got called in front of both, and Edward G. Robinson, if you're not aware who Edward G. Robinson is, look up a picture of him and you are aware who he is. If you've ever watched Looney Tunes or any, Edward G. Robinson is the guy that, if you ever do a gangster voice like this, you're fucking imitating Edward G. Robinson.
Yeah, and he's mentioned a bunch in Inherent Vice.
He is. In particular, his role in Michael Curtis's The Sea Wolf.
Edward G. Robinson was investigated for his liberal political activities during and after World War II, none strictly leftist.
Right, he was an anti-fascist during World War II, admittedly, but he was never a communist or anything.
When placed before the grander HUAC, named names, Dalton Trumbo was among them, and was allowed back into the industry, much akin to the character in Inherent Vice, Burke Stodger. Very interestingly, Robinson and Sinatra starred in a film together that ironically titled A Hole in the Head by Frank Capra from 1959. Ironic in its titling in that it debuted the song High Hopes, which in 1960 would serve as the campaign theme of John F. Kennedy.
I feel like it's odd that I've never heard that remarked upon. People, you'll read that big long list of here are the corollaries between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. And it's their names contain the same amount of letters. Well, it's why does nobody mention that Kennedy campaigned using a song from a movie called A Hole in the Head?
That's freaky.
Nobody mentions that shit.
Oh, you better have high, keep your high, keep those high up.
Let's move on. Let's move on from the hole in our heads.
I do just have to say how freaky that is. That is just odd.
It is.
So in 1952, Jack Tenney had actually run for vice president of the United States, with Douglas MacArthur as the president. MacArthur is a very highly Pynchonian figure. He's featured pretty prominently in Shadow Ticket. If our listeners want a Shadow Ticket reference, there you go.
There you go. There's some Shadow Ticket slop for you motherfuckers.
Right. But Tenney and MacArthur ran representing the Christian National Party, and it was a fairly controversial decision because MacArthur refused to have any public affiliation with the Christian National Party, and they kind of quote-unquote drafted him as a candidate. Jack Tenney had a very tenuous relationship with a lot of the California GOP mainline because of his very opportunistic political history. During the Great Depression up until 1944, he had been a Democrat, and he broke with the GOP for the Christian National Party over what he perceived as communist infiltration within the Eisenhower administration. So these are real, these remind me of the guy in these remind me of the guy in Crying a Lot 49, where he's like those left-wingers in the fucking John Birch Society.
Right. So when Mildred made the decision to run for state senate, Evelle was employed as a municipal judge, an appointed office to which he'd been appointed by Mildred's longtime friend, Governor Earl Warren. Mildred seems to have done a large amount of her own campaign strategizing, drawing on what was already nearly a decade of experience with GOP campaigns at a far higher level than a state senate race. Mildred received immediate support of the Los Angeles Times, run by one of the many czars of the California right wing, Harry Chandler, whose name will reappear. The LA Times also lent immediate support to Evelle in his campaigns in the upcoming 25 years, by the way.
Which, given she elaborates in her paper, she seems to paint a picture of it where it's to get a paper's political support, you just call them. And it's well, no, I think that's just a factor of you being the right species of right-winger.
Right. Right.
So the most interesting part of her run for state senate, and the reason why we're kind of wanting to look at it, is very interesting and pretty cruel bit of political chicanery that originated from Jack Tenney's campaign. So Tenney's campaign chairman and the manager of the campaign was a psychiatrist named Dr. Samuel D. Bergeson, who, at Jack Tenney's urging, found one of his patients who was the very similarly named Mrs. Hazel Younger, and placed her on the ballot with less than half an hour before submissions closed, basically just hoping to divert votes from Mildred Younger in just sheer confusion from voters. Mrs. Hazel Younger had actually only the year before served several months in Camarillo State Hospital as a schizophrenic under the care of this Dr. Bergeson. I don't know that she was ever fully aware of what was happening. There were interviews with her regarding this, and she seems to have been very, very confused about it.
Oh, Frankie's got the hiccup.
I'm not hiccuping, I'm burping.
Okay. Oh.
Motherfuck, you called it. If you hadn't said it wouldn't have happened. Okay, I'm kosher.
Okay.
So this is from an article in The Independent, dated June 6 of 1954. Hazel Younger, seemingly deeply unwell, refused to talk to the press, delegating this to her husband, Alan, who simply stated that they did not want to talk to the press. Which, there are, if you've got a newspapers.com subscription, there are a number of articles about Hazel Younger available. This was quite an item in the local newspapers at the time. So Hazel Younger mounted absolutely no campaign. She gave no speeches. Bergeson and Tenney openly announced that Hazel's campaign was nothing more than an attempt to draw votes away from Mildred. And they both acted like this was a very supreme act of political cunning. Like, they both seem to have been very impressed with this idea. They do kind of waffle on it after, like, Mildred Younger started filing lawsuits. They're like, well, we had nothing to do with it. But in the early interviews about it, they're like, no, we did that. It's real smart, wasn't it? These fuckers don't know what they don't think like we do.
They're high-fiving all around, man.
Right. It's always two dumb bitches being like, oh, exactly. All of this is very confusing, honestly. In a likely attempt to save face with the press, Hazel's husband, Alan, he disputed that Tenney and Bergeson had conspired to put her on the ballot. He said, she did not get into this thing to confuse voters. She just took a notion to run. Which is
she just wanted to run.
Sometimes that takes a great notion. That's from the LA Times. That's also from June the 6th, 1954. Mildred asserts that Hazel's husband was paid money by the Tenney campaign for use of her name. That's certainly a possibility. And in a very funny bit of bureaucracy, they couldn't even... Mildred Younger filed a number of lawsuits in regards to this. One of them was to get Hazel Younger's name removed from the ballot. Because at the time, submission to a mental hospital took away your right to vote in California. It may well still do that. But she wanted Hazel Younger taken off the ballot on the grounds that she couldn't even vote for herself. They could not actually do that because they could not actually serve her with papers. Because Hazel Younger and her family absconded from LA for nearly 2 months, almost as soon as the news got a hold of any of this.
She probably got some running money.
There's a part in the oral history where Mildred Younger says that, like, she was in the mental hospital again, but I can't find any reference to that. That seems to just be something she might have thought. There's no reference to her going back into the hospital during this time while she was running. It seems like they literally just got embarrassed and left town for a while. And a large amount, to keep going, a large amount of the backing for this weird move seems to have come out of GLK Smith's Christian identity groups. Because a lot of the people who had signed the petitions to get Hazel Younger's name on the ballot in the first place had been offered those petitions at Christian identity churches and offices. And notably, a lot of these people who signed these petitions said that they were led to believe that these were petitions for Jack Tenney himself. They didn't know who Hazel Younger even was. There are hints in these oral histories that Hazel Younger might have been involved in Christian identity herself. There's a reference, this is from Mildred. Her husband did all the talking. She sat in the car with a Bible tract in front of her and never looked anywhere. And obviously a lot of these far-right hate publications were doing their publications through Bible tracts, and she offers kind of token sympathy for Hazel, but Mildred also takes the time to be just really condescending and insulting about her for, like, a woman who was just actively just used and put in the spotlight for no good reason. She repeatedly calls the house they live in like a fucking dump. And, she's calling her like a pitiful thing. It's just really insulting. I have to say, I came out of her oral history with like a very strong dislike for her.
Yeah, she doesn't sound like a wonderful, warm person.
Right. She does, I don't know. Like, honestly, her personality through her oral history seems to be like, if you could go back in time, not just go back in time, if you could, like, do some kind of weird David Cronenberg experiment, take an article from a 1970s issue of Good Housekeeping and bring it to life, it would be Hazel Younger walking the fuck around talking.
Hazel Younger? Hazel or Mildred?
Mildred. Hazel Younger's such a nicer name.
It is. It's a lovely name.
That's a much more pleasant name than Mildred Younger.
Mildred. So moving on. Ultimately, all this was for naught, as Tenney wound up with less votes than Younger by more than 100,000. In both lost to their Democratic opponent, Richard Richards.
It's a very Pynchonian name,
Right, Richard Richards.
They call him Dick Richards.
They call him Dick Dicks. But this again goes to show the manner in which the Youngers could repeatedly serve as the liberal face of the GOP in the face of extremists like Tenney, whose only difference from the Youngers is merely a difference of degree and not one of type.
Righto.
So Mildred seems to have taken her loss of the election in stride and remained highly influential in the party, shortly thereafter helping to write the state GOP's official platform. So now we're going to get into some trash TV.
Right, we're going to get into some TV. It's TV time.
TV time, Pynchonian TV time.
Right, our man loves the tube.
The boob tube.
We've got information about the television coming, if you can bear with us, dear listener.
Yeah, we're gonna go balls out on that.
I'm very excited to go balls out on TV. I have been.
Yeah, you got a TV.
I've been watching
Gilligan's Island.
I've been watching literally all of the fucking Pynchonian hits. I've been watching Dark Shadow.
Wow.
It's not bad.
Is it good?
It's not great, but, like, it's actually really... They have really good sets.
Okay.
I don't know. It's not bad for vibe.
Their theme song's pretty banging, though.
Right. But anyway, so both of the Youngers actually have a very large amount of involvement in television, because towards the later half of the 50s, both Evelle and Mildred began dabbling in broadcasting and entertainment. And this wasn't really anything new, because Mildred had been giving Republican speeches on the radio. She'd been working as a lecturer for hire, including for Bullocks, again, mentioned in key scenes in Inherent Vice. For many years, she'd done this to earn money on the side, just kind of as a side gig. And in the late 50s, she would rise to the position of both radio and TV newswoman with CBS and ABC. She was actually even nominated for an Emmy, from what I understand.
She had previous experience as a model, so she had media training. Well, in a way.
Right, like, I really think that, like, if things had worked out differently, she would have wound up being a huge powerhouse in the Republican Party. But we're going to get to that. So one of her more interesting tasks during her time as a newswoman was her involvement in a special interest story that was ultimately meant as a recruitment push for the U.S. Special Air Command on ABC Radio. And the USSAC sent her up in a jet fighter. They put her in altitude chambers. They let her watch a nuclear test at Yucca Flats. And they took her on a tour of SAC bases across Europe and most notably Libya. This was in the late 50s. So this was kind of like, I guess this would have been early Gaddafi, you know? He would have been in the army during this time, right?
Oh, I'm not a Gaddafi specialist.
Okay, yeah, no. Gaddafi was 16 or so.
Evelle had his time on the tube. Evelle had briefly hosted KTLA's television show called Armchair Detective from 1948 to 1949. Armchair Detective comes across as a kind of mix between Alfred Hitchcock Presents and a game show. The host frames a rather poorly written and acted mystery tale, coming back at the end of the episode to point out clues and give explanations. None of the episodes hosted by Evelle survive, unfortunately.
Right, I think he, very shortly thereafter, he kind of got recalled to Korea and just, like, his time on Armchair Detective is not very long talked about. Even his time with this other show is not very long talked about. Because about a decade later in 1958, Evelle would briefly be the star of a minor revolution in television. This is actually kind of a big deal in TV history. Evelle Younger hosted possibly the first reality courtroom television show, which was called Traffic Court. And there were some predecessors, but Traffic Court really seems to have set the precedent for what we now call kind of like courtroom TV. And it didn't feature actual disputants like later shows, you know, like The People's Court or Judge Judy. But Traffic Court featured actors reading the minutes of actual court cases of, you know, particularly novel or pedagogic traffic court cases. Evelle Younger would only host the show for a very short time. I think he hosted it for about a year or two before the California State Bar asked him to step down due to a conflict of interest regarding the show's sponsors. They didn't really think it was appropriate to have, like, a sitting state judge also be doing his job on television for entertainment. You know, parts of his history with this kind of television show, you know, this kind of courtroom TV show, live in the courtroom almost. I find that to have a really interesting corollary with Doc and Fritz's conversation in Inherent Vice regarding the death of the PI in movies and television in general. You know, and it's like, maybe the Armchair Detective is kind of supplanting the average citizen is becoming the Armchair Detective, you know, and along with that process, there comes this increased subliminal desire to be policed. And, you know, you want to see not even policing or the act of detecting, but you just want to see adjudication, you know, meted out on television in real time with as little deviation from the source material as possible.
So we're going to read a kind of a meaty quote from Inherent Vice, Chapter 7. How about I read the first half and you read the second half?
Go for it.
So this is from Chapter 7. That Mickey, known to be a generous Reagan contributor, might be active in some anti-communist crusade came as no big surprise. But how deeply was Shasta involved? Who had arranged for her passage out of the country aboard the Golden Fang? Was it Mickey? Was it somebody else paying her off for her services and putting the snatch on Mickey? What could she have gotten into so heavy-duty that the only way out was to help set up the man she was supposed to be in love with? Bummer, man. Bummer. Assuming she even wanted out. Maybe she really wanted to remain in whatever it was, and Mickey stood in the way of that. Or maybe Shasta was seeing Sloane's boyfriend Riggs on the side, and maybe Sloane found out and was trying to get revenge by setting Shasta up for Mickey's murder. Or maybe Mickey was jealous of Riggs and tried to have him iced, only the plan misfired and whoever had contracted to do the deed showed up and by accident killed Mickey. Or maybe it was on purpose because the so far unknown hit person really wanted to run off with Sloane? Gah! Good shit, ain't it? Fritz handing back a smoldering roach and a roach clip, all that was left of what they'd been smoking. Defined good, Doc muttered. I am, overthinking myself into a brain freeze here. Fritz chuckled at length. Yeah, PIs should really stay away from drugs. All of them. Alternate universes just make the job that much more complicated. But what about Sherlock Holmes? He did coke all the time, man. It helped him solve cases. Yeah, but he was not real? What? Sherlock Holmes was... He's a made-up character in a bunch of stories, Doc. What? Nah, no, he's real. He lives at this real address in London. Well, maybe not anymore. It was years ago. He has to be dead by now. Come on, let's go over to Zucky's. I don't know about you, but I've suddenly got this, what Cheech and Chong might call Matzo Ball Jones. Entering the legendary Santa Monica delicatessen, they came under the red-eyed scrutiny of a crowd of freaks of all ages who seemed to be expecting somebody else. After a while, Magda showed up with the usual Zucky burger and fries, and rolled beef on rye, and potato salad, and Dr. Brown's celeries, plus another bowl of pickles and sauerkraut, and looking more than ordinarily imposed upon. Joint sure is jumping, Doc observed. Do you want to take it?
She rolled her eyes up and down the establishment. Marcus Welby, MD Freaks. You ever notice how the Zucky's sign shows up for half a second in the opening credits? Blink and you'll miss it, but it's more than enough for these people, who come in asking if that's like Dr. Steve Kelly's motorcycle parked out front, and where's the hospital, and who also, her voice rising as she left the table, get confused when they can't find Cheetos or Twinkies on the goddamn menu. At least it ain't Mod Squatters, Doc grumbled. What? Fritz innocently. That's my favorite show. Pro-cop fucking mind control's more like it. Inform on your friends, kitty. Get a lollipop from the captain. Listen, I came up in Temecula, which is crazy cat country, where you always root for Ignatz and not Officer Pup. They got into face-stuffing activities for a while, forgetting if they'd ordered anything else, bringing Magda back over, then forgetting what they wanted her for. 'Cause PIs are doomed, man, Doc continuing his earlier thought. You could have seen it coming for years, in the movies, on the tube. Once there were all these great old PIs, Philip Marlowe, Sam Spade, the Seamus of Seamuses, Johnny Staccato, always smarter and more professional than the cops, always end up solving the crime while the cops are following wrong leads and getting in the way, coming in at the end to put the cuffs on. Yeah, but nowadays, it's all you see anymore is cops. The tube is saturated with fucking cop shows. Just being regular guys, only trying to do the job, folks. No more threat to nobody's freedom than some dad in a sitcom. Right. Get the viewer population so cop-happy they're begging to be run in. Goodbye, Johnny Staccato. Welcome, and while you're at it, please kick my door down, Steve McGarrett. Meanwhile, out here in the real world, most of us private flatfoots can't even make the rent. So why do you stay in the business? Why not get a houseboat up in the Sacramento Delta? Smoke, drink, fish, fuck. You know what old guys do. Yeah, but don't forget piss and moan.
Right. So that was our quote from Chapter 7 of Inherent Vice. Yeah, we're going to close out with some more Mildred stuff.
Right, because this is kind of the ultimate... This is a real... I won't say the ultimate turning point. This is a real turning point in both of their lives. So, in 1958, this was shortly following Evelle's appointment as a judge on California's Supreme Court. And that was where he would stay until 1964 when he was appointed, he was elected DA of Los Angeles. Mildred Younger actually lost her voice almost entirely following a minor car accident where she got whiplash. There was the abrupt emergence of a condition called spasmodic Dysphonia. Great band name. But spasmodic dysphonia basically completely fucks up your vocal cords. It sends your vocal cords into these constant spasms. And it seems that the variety that she developed reduced her voice to a strained whisper for the next 17 years. She couldn't really talk above this.
Not good for politics.
Right. It's definitely not good for, like, where she was at, because, I mean, this sidelined her entire fucking career. It seems like she spent a large amount of that time being told that there was nothing wrong with her outside of her mind. Like, it seems like she spent a long time being told that whatever was wrong with her was psychosomatic. This completely, there is no more speech giving, there's no more lecturing, there's no more newswoman. All of that stuff is very much out the window, and this is definitely the moment where people start saying, you know, well, Evelle Younger got saddled with all of these things that his wife wanted to do. I think it's really tempting to look at it that way, because, like, in particular from these sources at the time, that's a very, like, battle of the sexes type way to view it.
Right, it's very, like, of that moment of being.
Right. I have hated the term battle of the sexes since I was, like, ever since the first time I heard that, I have hated that for some reason.
It's atrocious.
Who's winning?
I think, like, I don't know, men are sad, women are still oppressed, trans people are still getting murdered. No one's winning. Okay. Anyway,
but yeah, you know, it's very tempting to look at it that way, but really, like, I think that what we have with the Youngers is a political power couple.
Yeah, definitely.
When you read these sources, you know, I don't think it's fair to say that these were things pushed onto him by his wife, because they had a very loving, trusting, productive marriage. You know, these seem like two people who were very happy together. Like, as little as I like them, I can say that they seem to have a happy fucking marriage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, meet someone 8 times and then marry them. I guess that's the that's the secret.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She certainly did push Evelle into more political roles, and she was 100% his foot in the door with that. But again, I think that the better way to think of them is as a political power couple, as a duo, where Mildred composed the political power and Evelle composed, after a point, the legal power. The gears and levers of the California political power, you know, so the gears and levers of California political power are not easily accessible to a Nebraska farm boy, no matter who he married. And in our next episode, we're going to be exploring what Evelle Younger did exactly once he had access to that machinery, as Los Angeles DA, and later as Attorney General of the whole state.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned, because we will be back at you very soon.
We will.
We will be.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and on a closing note,
Right.
do you want to get into the
right,
please follow us?
Right. You know, number one, we want to thank everybody for listening. Again, we want to thank everybody so much for listening, because it means so much to both of us.
Yeah, and thanks for the shout-outs, too.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Again, thank you for bearing with us through the gap in episodes, because we work like dogs, and we do this in our spare time, and we work like dogs to do this. It means so much to us that anybody takes the time to like or comment and subscribe. And we heartily recommend that you do, as often as you can, like and comment and subscribe and repost the material and tell your friends, because we do this in our spare time for very little money. We deeply appreciate our paid subscribers at the moment. We love you so deeply. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's so heartwarming to know that
it is.
Even though we're not offering any like extra special things for paid subscribers right now, like just the fact that like you guys are paying for us, giving us money, it's really wonderful.
Right, and we are discussing things to do for our paid subscribers, but to just briefly discuss like the philosophy of pod, it's like, I don't want to press anybody for paid material, right? I don't want to press anybody for money right now.
Mm-hmm.
while you all as an audience are still getting to know our work.
Yeah, and we're still getting to know our work too. So we're like new.
We're very new. There are gaps, and again, we appreciate everybody so much. But again, any form of engagement, like, subscribe, comment, anything you can do that helps us out immensely, and we appreciate it so much. I can't say enough, the people that listen to this show, you are not numbers to us. We deeply appreciate. We think the world of every single one of you.
Yeah, and thank you for like all the DMs and emails too.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, like, feel free to ask us.
Yeah, our DMs are always open. Our email is open.
Don't ask for feet pics though, because you'll just get some from Frankie. You won't get any from me.
All right, and with that, I think we're gonna call it a night.
Okay, so until next time.
Until next time, folks. Thank you so much.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.